Can you hear me? Is the mic working? Okay, so as I've already been introduced, I'm Alice. I work at a company called Genry, and I'm part of their RAD team, which is Research, Analytics, and Data. And this isn't exactly what we do in the office. This is just a presentation on my master's, which I'm going to be taking you through. So first of all, I've called it Futurology because the actual title for my master's, which is this long thing at the bottom here, is a little bit boring to call a topic. So I called it Futurology, and basically what we're trying to do is predict extreme events. So as you know, life is full of extreme events. At the moment, we're in quite an extreme drought in Cape Town, and we're basically looking at what we can do to better predict those extreme events. So this, for my master's, is the main paper I'm using, which is to give you a bit of a background. What they did is they looked at, can they predict extreme events further into the future as opposed to just updating your model on a daily basis. So yeah, this is just for the academics in the room. I tried to extend this paper using more advanced extreme value theory, and also extending how frequently you update the model. So one of the things you get with financial data in particular is that the tails are normally slightly fatter than your normal distribution. So I'm sure most people are familiar with your normal distribution. It's the one in black, as you can see. And most financial data, if you look at the daily returns, it actually has a slightly fatter tail, so your tails aren't exponentially bounded, which makes it really difficult to predict what's happening in the tails. So how do we deal with this? How do we handle not having a normal distribution, which we're all happy and comfortable with? So the first thing that I did was, the first important thing is when you're looking at your normal distribution, you normally just look at your first two moments, the mean and the variance of the volatility of your distribution. When you're looking at extreme value distribution, you have to look at your third and fourth moments, which is looking at the skewness of the distribution as well as the tail density, which is what I'm zooming in on and focusing on. So there's two approaches generally. So the first one you can see on the your left, my right, is the block maximum method, which what we've done is we've divided our data into blocks. And from there, we take the most extreme value from each block. The second method is called the peaks over threshold method, which you set a relatively high threshold. I'm using 90%, and you take all of the data above that point. So here's an example with the JSC All. I'm sure we're all familiar with the JSC. This is JSC All. So you can see over here where you get a lot of movement happening over here. That was the 2007-2008 financial crash, which I'm sure we all remember that. That was one of the interesting things that we were looking at, is can we actually better predict that using more advanced extreme value theory? Could we have been more aware that this crash was going to happen? So this is my general approach to what I've done. So this is the boring code side of things. So initially you fit the GARCH model, which, I don't know if there's any stats people in the room, your generalized auto-aggressive conditional heteroscedastic model. So for any of the stats people in the room, so from there you fit your GARCH model. We used your GARCH 1.1 model, which is your standard GARCH model. Then I extracted the residuals. Your residuals are the most extreme values. So basically everything that you see over here, your most extreme values, basically. So I extracted the residuals, and then from there we fitted it to one of two distributions, either your generalized Pareto distribution, if you're using your peaks over threshold method, or your generalized extreme value distribution, if you're using your block maximum method. And then from there we used three different tests. We used your value at risk test, your VAR test, where we used the Christopher's test and the Cupric test, and then the expected shortfall test. And one of the really interesting things that we found from this was when we did the back testing, we actually found that when you update your model every 5 days, you actually get surprisingly accurate results. You'd expect if you update a model less frequently, you'd get less accurate results because you're getting data inputs less often, but we actually found that there were underlying trends and patterns which you don't pick up when you're just looking at one-day updates. So when we updated every 5 days, we actually found it predicted incredibly well, which kind of hints at the fact that perhaps there are underlying trends and patterns which we are missing when we're just looking at a one-day model. So that was one of the really interesting things for me. Unfortunately, I didn't include that section of the code because my master's is still in progress. So when it's published, you guys can see the final results.